now it's time to get back to the rink. And I think everyone looking forward to, seeing what this team has for us to begin the season, as well as a number of storylines that honestly haven't changed very much, Dan. With the uncertain futures of Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele, a very busy, very packed blue line with a number of players battling for ice time and spots on the roster. But certainly, heck, it's great. It gives us lots to talk about as we get ready for the real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting today. I was actually able to get out and listen to Rick speak, and I liked what he had to say. I'm glad that he sort of lined out, and we would have known tomorrow anyway what he expects the lines to look like, at least the top three, that he's going to give Carey a shot at center in the fourth line. I'm like a lot of different people. I'm eager to see how Cole Perfetti can do. I mean, what a great opportunity for him. So for me, that's one of the big, real big storylines coming into camp. And, like he said all the right things that to expect a lot of skating, to expect a difficult camp. One thing that Rick said that I thought was interesting, and I kind of felt it last year. He said, because of the schedule, we didn't get a chance to practice enough. And maybe, observers like me kind of forget how important that is. But he said they expect to be able to practice more this year and get the details a little more under control. So they'll be full of vinegar to start tomorrow for sure.
No doubt about that. Dan, there was a lot of questions about the futures of a number of players. One we got conclusion to in Nashville with the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. What did you think of the return coming back from LA? And how do you think that those three new players coming into the mix in that top 12 in different roles might change and what they'll bring to the team, both on the ice and in the dressing room?
Well, first of all, I thought they got a good return, considering Cheveldayoff's hands were tied a little bit. So it should make them a little bit deeper. Arguably it will in a sense. So I'm interested to see. I mentioned Rasmus Carey a few minutes ago. I'm interested to see what he has to show. I think anytime a guy is an ex-first round pick, for me, that kind of raises a flag, and you think, okay, there's something there. Maybe he just didn't get a chance to show it in Los Angeles, or maybe he had the chance to show it and didn't earn it. Maybe he's at the age now where he can earn it, but it makes sense that they'll give him the start of the fourth line center. I look at Iafallo and just the line that Rick talked about today, with Lowry in the middle and Appleton on the right. If they can stay healthy, and we know that Appleton struggled with that last year, I think that can be a really good third line, tough to play against, and they can chip in offensively. I'm eager to see Vilardi too. There's another guy. All these guys are getting real opportunity, right? Vilardi looks like, he is going to start on the first line of right wing. So that's intriguing. Had a good season last year with goals scored and kind of turned a corner. With Dubois gone, it does, as we said, raise a question down the middle. Can Perfetti hang on to that number 2 spot, or can he be effective there? Without the puck, I think, is the biggest question. And, we know with Adam Lowry now with captain, that should change the leadership dynamic. Wheeler's not there, Dubois not there. How does that change things in the room? I'm not sure if we can tangibly see that. But all of those things that we're talking about, make for some interesting storylines heading into the season.
No doubt about it. And just on what you just mentioned there at the end, we've kicked this around lately, like the departure of Blake Wheeler. What does that do to the group? They obviously felt it was important because they had to cut a check for $5.5 million to do that. And he's going to be playing. And he was very productive last year. He did have 55 points. But I think this is, in a lot of ways, the official passing of the torch to a new generation of leaders. And I'm interested. You're around the team all the time. And, you see what's out there. You also see things behind the scenes. Every single person I've talked to within the Jets organization, in and around them, people in hockey ops, people outside of hockey ops, speak so highly of Adam Lowry about, how he treats others. And then you hear people, he in a lot of ways, Dan, I think was sort of that bridge between some of the younger players and the more veteran players. And, while is he 100-point scorer, like often is the captain on some points? No. I'll tell you what, he was one of, if not the best player in the playoffs. And interested in your perspective on Adam getting the honor of being the captain and how he'll fit into that role and the effect that'll have on the team.
I think it's great. When I got here last year, and Kevin Sawyer and I started talking right away about the team, and he said, "You're really going to like Adam. He's salt of the earth." And I thought, yeah, okay, that's, you hear that about certain people, but just from my own perspective, I mean, right away, he always has time to speak with you, always looks you in the eye, always calls you by your name, little things, but, you get an idea of the guy's character. And then, you mentioned what he did in the playoffs and down the stretch too, when they needed wins. I can remember a game in Nashville when he scored a big goal to help them get a win. And just the thing, I mean, fighting Ryan Reeves, we all know what Adam did along those lines just this past year. So
that might have been the moment, Dan. I mean, I just remember that video of him coming back, and maybe we just got a chance to see that because their social team did such a great job of sort of documenting that moment and brought us kind of behind the scenes. But I mean, we have talked about it. I mean, because listen, this was a 2-horse race, if you ask me. Josh Morrissey, Adam Lowry, you couldn't go wrong either way. But I kind of think that moment, and of course, that was the night that they clinched the playoff spot, if I recall correctly. That was a big, big part. And I think if anything, that might have cemented 17 for the role of Winnipeg Jets captain.
No, it certainly didn't hurt, did it? It was, I mean, look, people will scoff at fighting, whatever, but he was answering the bell against the best fighter in the NHL, and he did okay. And even if he didn't do okay, that's all right. He showed up, and that's what he's about. And then, I learned too that just what kind of a person he is, just I guess by a word of mouth in the community, and all those things carry weight. But it'll be interesting now. The dynamic, that leadership dynamic, has shifted. I mean, there were guys, I don't want to say in Wheeler's camp, whatever, but that sort of presence won't be there now. So it's kind of the turning of a new page. And it's funny too, before they named him the captain, I thought certainly that he should be. And I wondered, and it was interesting to listen to different people talk about it. Does your captain have to be a guy like Morrissey who puts up a lot of points, or pick a star player on a team, a Stamkos, a Crosby? Well, I don't think it does. I mean, this is a natural fit. So how that shows itself on the ice, I'm not sure, but it's obviously, well, I say obviously, I believe it's a really good move for the Jets.
Dan Robertson, voice of the Jets on TSN with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Well, Dubois is gone. Scheifele's still here and Hellebuyck's still here. And we'll probably hear from those guys tomorrow. And I imagine that, I mean, if they're not already sitting down and doing a powwow with Scott Brown about how everything's going to be handled, I'm sure that will happen beforehand. And I think it's a best case, it's in the best interest of everyone if, you sort of just couch those conversations. There's not much players can really do while they're here. But how do you think that this might, if it continues to go on expiring contracts with always the potential of a potential trade, what do you think that does to two guys that, let's not forget, are in their contract years and have every reason to have the years of their career, considering they'll be signing a new contract somewhere, whether it's Winnipeg or elsewhere at the end of the season?
It's fascinating to me, and I want to get your opinion on this too. So, and what you just said makes sense, right? So both of those guys know that their contract is up this year, and they will be in for a big payday next year. I don't know if does that affect their approach from day to day? I don't think, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, I don't think they're sitting around saying, well, I can sign a new contract next year, so I'm going to work harder this year than I did last year, if you know what I mean. So you do have to wonder about that. Or, I guess on the flip side, say if you look at Scheifele, he gets off to a bad start, and there's no indication that'll happen, but does that start to play on your mind? I wonder, do you think we put too much stock in expiring contracts and saying, well, this guy's going to have a better year or try to have a better year because his contract is up this year?
It's an interesting question. And I think it's sort of different between the two guys.
Right.
Like Hellebuyck is a goalie. I mean, he's as driven, as focused as an individual. And to be honest, I don't think anything's changing with Connor. I think he probably has in the back of his head that, he wants to continue to be doing what he's doing. But listen, he's won a Vezina Trophy. He's very much established. listen, I don't think that, to your point, I mean, he won't be preparing anymore. I mean, you know what you're getting every night from Connor. Scheifele's situation is is fascinating is a perfect word for it, because he is a guy that, is coming off a career high 42-goal season. And it didn't seem like there was a significant market for him out there, at least as to what would be expected for that. And whether that's something that resonates with him, whether he's asking his questions as to why that might have been the case, I'm not sure. But I do think that the way the last couple seasons have ended, certainly what happened last year over the last weeks of the season with him being moved off of center, and, we talked about that a lot. I think it shows that in some ways, even for a guy that's had as great a career as Mark has had, I kind of think that he really does have something to prove, that he can be a super productive player, but maybe give a little bit more attention to, frankly, the things that help the team win that might show up on the score sheet, because that matters to other teams as much as, if you're just going to contract arbitration, more often than not, they're going to look at the numbers. And I mean, listen, some people that might not be as big of fans of Mark might think that, in the past, he's shown signs of being a selfish player. Well, what does that do to a guy that is so focused on numbers in a contract year? I mean, it can go a few different ways. And that interview tomorrow from Mark, I think will be the one that most observers of the Winnipeg Jets will be most interested to hear. And I have every reason to believe that he's going to say the right things. And I really do hope that maybe getting away from the situation and realizing both the opportunities that he's had, but, some of the things that have happened in the past it's certainly best case scenario for the Winnipeg Jets if he does acknowledge all of that and come in, with an attitude that what is good for the team is also good for him, and go out and be the number one center that he's been for a long time, and do it in all areas of the game, as I say, because that'll make Rick Bowness happy. And he wasn't always very happy towards the end of last season, in particular with Mark.
No, it's fascinating. And does he come in here and feel slighted that he didn't get, I don't want to say considered to be captain, but that the C is not on his jersey? Does that bother him on any level? You would think so. And with Dubois moving along, I mean, Pierre-Luc was good in his own end last year. We heard, and more than just last year, we heard Rick, when Pierre-Luc was playing really well, say, what we're not focusing enough on, or maybe the fans or observers aren't, is how good he is in his own end. So can Scheifele pick up some of that slack, right? Because now Perfetti is the number two center. Well, Cole's not nearly as big. To make that comparison with Dubois, how strong can he be in his own end? So will the defensive responsibilities fall more on Mark's shoulders, this year than last year? So, we've used the word fascinating a couple of times. It certainly is. And will he say tomorrow, I'll address the fact that this is the last year of my contract today, and then that's it? Maybe so. Maybe that's for the best. But it is really, it's like a league-wide story, and everybody, everybody's keeping an eye on it, but it's going to be fun to watch and just to see, I think, how Scheifele gets out of the gate. He was firing last year, and 42 goals, and still there were some downsides to his game. So he's always a pivotal player in this organization.
Yeah, he's just so important. And that is the other thing. If anything that can bring out the best in Mark is huge for the Winnipeg Jets. And that in a lot of ways, and it's a good thing Rick Bowness has all the experience that he has under his belt, because that is a big challenge from the coaching staff. And part of it, listen, everyone knows how talented the guy is, and you put him out on the power play or play with some good players, there's going to be points. But in the absence of Dubois, in the aftermath of Blake Wheeler going, how does this team come together? How much does he feel a part of it? I think is all very, very important. But at the end of the day, getting that buy-in from everybody in the locker room to do those little things and be a little bit more committed to the things that might not show up on all the highlight reels, but help your team win hockey games, is certainly going to be Arnie and Bones' number one priority. Well, we mentioned kind of taking care of things in their own end. Of course, the last line of defense is the goaltender. We know about Connor Hellebuyck, but a lot of familiar faces coming back in the defense core, young players trying to get spots on the roster, players that were in the lineup last year, I mean, that established top six, the guys that were in the press box. It's crowded on the Jet blue line, Dan. What do you make of the makeup right now, I guess, of the Jets' depth chart when it comes to defense, knowing that there could be some very, very tough decisions, barring any sort of player moves before final cuts?
Well, I'm going to say I stole from Marat. I read his stuff in The Athletic all the time. He made some good points recently about, and a lot of folks have been talking about Declan Chisholm, that he's out of options, that he would have to clear waivers to go back to Manitoba. I don't know enough about Declan at all, just to see what people are writing about him and saying about him, that he's been very strong with the Moose. I don't know. Look, I look at Ville Heinola as well, and is there enough there for him to supplant someone on defense? Can he show enough in training camp? Is it already a foregone conclusion that blue line is set? I almost think that way, right? It's funny because maybe in a sense there's some guys that you might like to trade to give some young guys more of an opportunity, but there's some contracts there that might hamstring the Jets. So I really don't see many changes at all. Can somebody step up? I mean, just to me, with respect to those defensemen, there's Morrissey, and then after that, there's a fairly big drop off. So I think there's depth, but the high end quality would have been good. I think had they been able to, procure not a top end defenseman in the Dubois trade. I think that might have been too much to ask, but somebody who has that sort of potential. But I kind of see it as it's like Marat wrote that. Chisholm's kind of the Kovacevic of last year, so we'll see. But I don't see any big surprises heading toward the regular season.
Yeah, and I mean Declan, has played so well in Manitoba for the last couple of years, and I mean we kind of did some digging when we were out in Nashville, asking people around the league, especially ones that got a pretty good handle on the AHL and prospects, as to whether Declan Chisholm would be able to be snuck through waivers if he wasn't in the starting lineup, and there was no one that would confidently say yes. We saw what happened last year with Johnny, and with what Declan's shown at the AHL level, drafted and developed, you would hate to lose a player like that without ever really getting a chance to see them at the NHL level. And I would imagine that might mean a tough call for Kyle Capobianco, who was a good soldier last year, doing everything that he was asked. Now he's on a one-way deal this year, so he'll still get the NHL paycheck, whether it will be with Winnipeg, whether it'll be in the American League, or whether there's somebody else that would jump on Capobianco. I think he would be the one more replaceable player when you're talking about some young players. And yeah, for Ville, I mean, it's just it's a tough situation because it's hard to imagine what he could do to force his way into the lineup, which would then necessitate making some sort of a trade, or again, and losing a player off on waivers. Bottom line is, we know this: Josh Morrissey is going to be the leader of that blue line. But I do think, I'm of the opinion, Dan, that Neil Pionk, a big bounce back season for Neil, and he joined us on the program last week or the week before, was very much looking forward to getting going. If we could see more of the Neil Pionk closer to the guy 2 years ago that earned that 4-year extension, I'm not sure there's a player on the back end that could have more of an impact on the positive fortunes of the Winnipeg Jets than Neil, because, I mean, he is in a position where he is playing significant minutes, important matchups. I'm quite intrigued to see, especially if he's able to play with Declan Chisholm, Dylan Samberg guy. I mean, that Hermantown connection, what that pair could do. But I think a lot is on the shoulders of Neil Pionk, but also opportunity for him to really be a big benefit if he can kind of get back to playing near his ceiling.
Yeah, there were some struggles for Neil. There were high points too, right? I can remember early he scored an overtime goal in Colorado. So you see the pieces there, or the quality of his play, but can he kind of keep that up for the entire season? You mentioned Dylan Samberg, and it was interesting, I thought, to watch last year his progression from. I think you could see his confidence grow. There were times as the season went on where he would have the puck, and maybe early in the season he would have fired it off the boards or just made a pass. And he, as the season went on, you could kind of see his confidence grow. So he'd carry the puck a little more, and I really liked his poise. So I don't know what his ceiling is. but I mean, he's under contract, and he's in a good spot too. Again, you talk about opportunity, and I think anytime you go into training camp, you're looking at young guys, and there's players in every team who, if there's ice time for them to earn, and I kind of feel that way about Samberg, who, as we said, had a pretty good year last year. So, there is depth on that blue line. Who's going to step forward and get more important minutes? Maybe Samberg is one of those guys. And you mentioned Capobianco, I should say. And it was a small role he played last year, but anytime he stepped in, he was really good. So those guys are valuable to have around too.
Yeah. And listen, and that's not an easy role. I mean, You're happy and you're thankful to be in the National Hockey League, but I mean, when you're doing the bag skates after the morning skate every day and you're in the press box eating popcorn, and it would be easy not to feel a part of the team. It certainly seemed like he did. And I'll give him credit, Dan. When he did go into the lineup last year, sometimes after long, extended periods of time in the press box, I thought he really acquitted himself well. I mean, he was not hurting the Jets when he was out there for the most part. That's for sure.
No, and you think about it too. Those guys, okay, so his year last year, and I remember talking with him in Calgary. He had played a game not long before that. I said, you were really good. I said, I know it's tough for you to get into the lineup. He said, I know what my situation is, right? He's no fool. But they were fairly healthy on the blue line last year. I mean, I remember Schmidt got hurt, and obviously Morrissey got hurt at the end. But those guys they're good to have around when the injuries strike, and we all know that can happen. Kyle Capobianco isn't going to make a huge difference, I don't think, with respect to him with his organization. But as I said, those guys are valuable, and he's a piece at the puzzle trying to get more minutes, just like a lot of them are.
Obviously, we just finished up following the Young Stars tournament out in Penticton, and while I think it is an incredible long shot for any of those young players, I mean, the recent picks, to be making an impact at least early on this season. You never know what can happen with injuries or the way things go out of the gate. But in addition to focusing on what we project to be the NHL roster, another side of training camp, Dan, is going to be a really exciting group of young players, including Colby Barlow, who was just picked in Nashville, Brad Lambert, who seems to have really taken steps over the last year, Chaz Lucius, the Swedish defenseman Elias Salmonsson. We probably won't be talking about those guys as much in a couple weeks, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how they acquit themselves in the scrimmages and the practices, as well as hopefully some early season preseason action, because I think 365 days from right now, we'll be talking about a number of those players, potentially even including Rucker McGroarty, who's not here in Michigan right now, as being guys that are in the mix to try and take jobs with the big club.
Yeah, that's a good point that you make. I think the Moose are going to be really interesting this year. I got a chance to see more of Lambert in the WHL final, and obviously the speed and the skill really stood out. And if you remember back last training camp, he had a good preseason, right? Scored a couple of goals. I can remember, I think it was in Edmonton. Yeah, that's right. And he came in one time and split the D against the Oilers, and it was like, okay, this kid's got some skill now. Can he put it together? That's the thing, right? It's tough to be patient with young players. You almost say, okay, they have Lambert, they have Lucius, they have these guys, Shiberkov. I want to see them now. Well, it usually doesn't work that way. They have to put their time in and learn to become pros. So it's going to be kind of an added bonus, I think, for us this year to kind of keep an eye on what they do at those lower levels. And look, I don't think there's anything. You look at a guy like Lambert, what's he going to do? He comes in and scores 2 goals in every game that he plays in the preseason. Well, he's not going to make the team, right? You're not going to put him on the fourth line to play right wing. So they'll have to bide their time. But it's fun to watch, just to see the guys, even though they've been through a camp before, a guy like Lambert, to see the enthusiasm that they bring to preseason games. And hopefully, as you said, they do play well, and that might help get them off to a good start when the regular season begins.
Well, and I think the organization may be telegraphing a little bit of what's to come, or what these players are going to, and where they'll be at this year, because we saw Lambert getting plenty of time in the middle at center. We saw Lucius as well. And I think figuring out who are going to be the guys that have sort of been in those Dubois and Scheifele positions for the last couple of years into the future is also a big part of that.